The most dangerous misunderstandings begin with the words people laugh at the hardest. Rain washed the glass walls of Bennett Financial Group, while the last employees hurried to finish another exhausting Thursday. Inside the executive conference room, empty coffee cups and scattered reports told the story of a week that had demanded more from everyone than anyone expected. Ethan Brooks loosened his tie and stretched tired shoulders that carried far more than long workdays. At 38, he had become an expert at hiding exhaustion behind an easy smile, because waiting at home was his 8-year-old daughter, Lily, and she deserved a father who greeted every morning with hope instead of disappointment. Around the table, coworkers exchanged playful complaints about overtime, while someone joked that only a miracle could save them from another late-night deadline. Ethan laughed quietly, rubbing the back of his neck before looking toward Charlotte Bennett, the company's respected owner, who remained focused on reviewing financial reports beneath the soft light hanging above the polished walnut table. She was known throughout Chicago as brilliant, disciplined, and impossible to distract. Very few employees had ever seen her lose composure. Trying to lighten the mood, Ethan smiled and said, "Well, if nobody else is volunteering, maybe you should just marry me, boss." Laughter immediately erupted across the room. One accountant nearly dropped his coffee. Another employee covered his face, already imagining tomorrow's awkward conversation with human resources. Ethan chuckled at his own ridiculous joke and prepared to apologize, but before a single word left his mouth, the laughter faded. Charlotte slowly closed the folder she had been reading and looked directly into his eyes. There was no anger in her expression. There was no embarrassment. Instead, something quiet and deeply personal seemed to pass across her face, as though one ordinary sentence had unlocked a memory she had protected for years. She calmly stood, gathered nothing from the table, and said only 4 words. "Come upstairs with me." The room became completely silent. Ethan blinked in confusion. "Ma'am?" he asked carefully, convinced he had misunderstood. Charlotte repeated herself in the same gentle voice. "Please, come with me." Without another explanation, she turned toward the private elevator beside her office. The sound of her footsteps echoed softly across the marble floor, while every employee watched in complete disbelief. Ethan remained frozen for several seconds before quietly following, convinced he was about to receive the shortest employment review in company history. The elevator doors closed behind them, leaving whispers and stunned expressions downstairs. Neither of them spoke as the elevator climbed beyond the executive offices toward the private residence occupying the building's highest floor. Rain traced silver lines across the glass walls overlooking downtown Chicago, while city lights shimmered below like distant stars. Ethan rehearsed apologies in his mind, but none of them felt large enough to explain the situation. When the elevator finally stopped, Charlotte stepped into a warmly lit hallway that felt nothing like a corporate building. Wooden bookshelves lined the walls. Fresh flowers rested beside framed family photographs. The comforting scent of chamomile tea drifted quietly through the air. She walked toward a closed door at the end of the hallway, rested her hand on the brass handle, and paused before turning back toward Ethan. Her blue eyes carried quiet emotion rather than accusation. "Everything you think this moment means," she whispered gently, "is about to change." Charlotte slowly turned the brass handle and pushed the door open. Ethan hesitated before stepping inside, expecting a luxurious bedroom that would only deepen the confusion already racing through his mind. Instead, he stopped in complete silence. The room felt nothing like the private retreat of one of Chicago's most successful executives. Warm wooden bookshelves stretched from floor to ceiling. Fresh white lilies rested inside a simple glass vase beside the window. A comfortable reading chair faced a stone fireplace where a quiet flame flickered gently. Framed family photographs covered one wall, and soft instrumental piano music drifted through hidden speakers, filling the room with peaceful warmth instead of awkwardness. Charlotte walked toward an antique oak cabinet without saying a word. She opened the upper drawer and carefully removed a weathered leather photo album whose edges had softened with age. Holding it with remarkable care, she carried it to the coffee table between them. Ethan finally found his voice. "Charlotte, if my joke downstairs crossed a line, I truly am sorry." She looked at him with calm blue eyes and slowly shook her head. "You did not cross a line." Ethan frowned. "Then why am I here?" Charlotte rested one hand gently on the album before answering. Because tonight you unknowingly opened a door that has remained closed for almost 10 years. She slowly lifted the cover. The first photograph showed a community charity event outside a neighborhood church on a bright spring afternoon. Volunteers smiled beneath white tents while children ran across the parking lot carrying paper cups filled with lemonade. Ethan immediately recognized himself standing beside Emily, his late wife, both of them wearing matching volunteer shirts stained with flour from serving homemade bread. His heartbeat slowed as memories quietly returned. Emily had insisted they spend their wedding anniversary serving families instead of celebrating themselves. Charlotte carefully turned another page. A second photograph revealed the same afternoon from a different angle. Ethan leaned closer. Several feet away stood a young blonde woman in a simple gray sweater, holding a disposable coffee cup with both hands. Her expression carried exhaustion, uncertainty, and quiet loneliness. Ethan studied the image before looking toward Charlotte. "That is you," he whispered. She nodded gently. "Yes." Rain continued sliding across the windows overlooking the city while neither of them spoke for several moments. Ethan searched his memory but found nothing. "I do not remember meeting you." Charlotte smiled softly, not with disappointment, but with gratitude. "You were never supposed to remember me," she replied. "You and Emily spent the entire afternoon making certain every stranger felt welcome. You never stopped to ask who I was or why I looked frightened. You simply treated me like I belonged." She reached beneath the photograph and carefully unfolded a small piece of yellowed stationery tucked safely inside the album. "Your wife handed me this before I left that afternoon." Ethan accepted the folded paper with careful hands. Before opening it, he immediately recognized Emily's handwriting across the front. His throat tightened. Charlotte quietly stepped back, allowing him the dignity of reading in silence. As he unfolded the note, he realized that whatever truth had brought him into this room was far greater than a misunderstood joke, and the woman standing before him had been carrying that truth alone for nearly a decade. The paper felt unexpectedly heavy in Ethan's hands, although it contained only a few handwritten lines. He unfolded it carefully, and before reading the first sentence, he recognized Emily's graceful handwriting immediately. She had always written as though every word deserved patience. A small sunflower was drawn beneath the signature, something she added to nearly every note, because she believed flowers quietly reminded people that light could always be found after difficult seasons. Ethan slowly began reading. "If today feels impossible, remember that no storm stays forever. Someday you will discover that the smallest kindness often becomes another person's greatest miracle." He stopped reading for a moment as memories returned with remarkable clarity. Emily had carried dozens of handwritten notes inside her purse everywhere they went. She slipped them into library books, grocery bags, volunteer boxes, and coat pockets whenever she sensed someone needed encouragement. To her, kindness was never an extraordinary event. It was simply the most ordinary way to live. Charlotte watched him quietly, giving him all the time he needed before finally speaking. "That note saved my life in ways I did not understand until years later." Ethan slowly looked up. Charlotte gently turned another page inside the album. The next photograph showed Emily smiling while serving homemade soup beneath the church tent, but Ethan noticed something different this time. Standing in the background was the young blonde woman once again, watching from a distance with tired eyes and a cautious expression. Charlotte touched the edge of the picture with quiet respect. "I had just lost everything," she said softly. "My father had passed away 6 months earlier. The business he left behind had collapsed under debt. I believed I had disappointed everyone who ever believed in me." Ethan listened without interrupting. "That afternoon, I almost turned around before walking into the church parking lot because I felt ashamed of needing help." Charlotte smiled faintly through memories that had clearly never faded. "Your wife welcomed me before I even reached the serving table. She spoke to me as though we had known each other for years. She never asked why I was there. She only asked whether I had eaten." Ethan lowered his eyes. That sounded exactly like Emily. Charlotte continued. "While everyone else saw a volunteer event, she somehow noticed one frightened woman trying to disappear into the crowd." She carefully lifted another photograph from beneath the album page. This one captured Ethan carrying heavy food boxes toward an elderly couple waiting beside an old station wagon. He was smiling without realizing anyone had been watching. And then there was you, Charlotte whispered. You stayed long after the event ended because one family still needed help loading groceries into their car. No cameras, no applause, no recognition, just quiet kindness. Ethan shook his head gently. We never thought anyone would remember any of it. Charlotte looked directly into his eyes. I remembered every single moment. She carefully closed the album before walking toward a writing desk beside the window. Opening the top drawer, she removed a neatly organized employee folder bearing Ethan's name across the front. He immediately recognized it as his personnel file. Confused, he looked back at Charlotte. She placed the folder beside the old letter and rested her hand upon it with calm certainty. 3 years ago, she said quietly, this file landed on my desk after Human Resources recommended hiring someone else. They believed another applicant had a stronger career. History. I looked at your name only once before everything changed, because in that moment I realized the man who had unknowingly helped save my future was standing outside my office asking only for an opportunity to work with dignity. Charlotte slowly opened Ethan's personnel file and placed it beside Emily's handwritten note as though both belonged together. Ethan stared at the documents in quiet disbelief, unable to understand how a hiring file and a 10-year-old letter could possibly be connected. Charlotte looked toward the rain-covered windows before speaking again. Human Resources recommended another applicant, she said calmly. His resume was stronger. His career had no interruptions. On paper, he was the safer choice. Ethan smiled faintly. I cannot blame them for thinking that. Charlotte gently shook her head. Neither could I, until I read your application myself. She slowly removed the first page from the folder. There was a 3-year gap in your employment history. Ethan lowered his eyes. Emily became sick. After she passed away, Lily needed me more than any career ever could. Charlotte nodded with quiet understanding. Most people saw a gap. I saw a father who refused to let his daughter face grief alone. She handed him another page filled with interview notes written by department managers. Ethan read several comments aloud without realizing it. Always respectful to everyone. Volunteers to help coworkers without being asked. Never complains. Leaves exactly on time every evening to pick up his daughter. Ethan looked embarrassed. Those are not accomplishments. Charlotte smiled softly. That depends on what kind of company someone wants to build. She walked toward a large bookshelf and picked up a framed photograph taken during the first year Bennett Financial occupied a tiny office with fewer than 20 employees. When I finally rebuilt my father's business, she explained, I promised myself that success would never come at the expense of someone's family. Ethan quietly studied the photograph. Emily used to say that no promotion was worth missing the people waiting at home. Charlotte's smile grew warmer. I know. Ethan looked up, surprised. Charlotte continued. She told me exactly that while handing me a bowl of soup beneath the church tent. Silence settled gently between them once again. The fireplace crackled softly while the rain outside slowly became lighter. Charlotte carefully placed the old photograph back onto the shelf before returning to the coffee table. Every important policy inside this company began with something your wife taught me. Ethan frowned. What do you mean? Flexible schedules for parents. Emergency family leave. Scholarships for employees' children. Paid volunteer days. Every single one exists because one woman showed kindness to a complete stranger without asking who she was. Ethan felt his throat tighten. Emily had been gone for almost 6 years, yet somehow her compassion continued shaping the lives of hundreds of families she had never met. Charlotte slowly reached into another drawer beneath the writing desk and removed a sealed cream-colored envelope. Across the front, written in careful blue ink, were the words, "To the family who changed mine forever." She placed it gently into Ethan's hands. I wrote this the night I signed the papers for my first successful business, she said quietly. Ethan looked at the envelope but did not open it immediately. You kept this all these years? Charlotte nodded. Whenever I doubted myself, I read it again. It reminded me that companies exist to serve people, not the other way around. Ethan finally unfolded the letter. The very first sentence stopped him completely. It read, "If I ever become the person they believed I could be, I will spend the rest of my life making sure their kindness never disappears from this world." Ethan slowly looked back at Charlotte, realizing that everything he had believed was simple luck had actually been the faithful fulfillment of a promise she had quietly protected for an entire decade. Ethan remained silent as he folded Charlotte's letter with the same care someone might give a priceless family heirloom. His thoughts drifted back through countless ordinary mornings that had never seemed important enough to remember. Driving Lily to school before sunrise. Leaving the office exactly on time every evening. Declining promotions that required constant travel because his daughter still needed someone waiting outside her classroom every afternoon. For years, he had quietly wondered whether those choices had cost him the future he once imagined. Standing inside Charlotte's peaceful residence, he suddenly realized those very decisions had become the reason someone else believed in him before he believed in himself. Charlotte gently accepted the letter after he handed it back and placed it inside the antique desk. "There is one more truth I have never shared with anyone," she said softly. Ethan looked toward her with quiet curiosity. "The day you interviewed here, I recognized your name immediately. I knew exactly who you were before you ever walked into the conference room." Ethan looked surprised. "Why did you never tell me?" Charlotte smiled with gentle humility. "Because gratitude should never become pressure. I did not want you wondering whether every opportunity came from my memories instead of your own work." She slowly opened another folder filled with annual performance reviews. Every page carried positive comments written by different supervisors over 3 years. Reliable, honest, encouraging, calm under pressure, respected by every department. Charlotte rested one hand upon the stack of papers. "You earned every one of these. I never changed a review. I never asked anyone to promote you. I only gave you the same opportunity another person once gave me." Ethan quietly studied the pages before lifting his eyes again. Emily always believed kindness should set people free, never make them feel indebted. Charlotte nodded with emotion. "She taught me that too." The fire continued burning quietly while the rain outside finally stopped. Moonlight began reflecting across the city skyline, replacing the gray evening with thousands of gentle lights stretching toward the horizon. Charlotte walked toward the large window and looked out over Chicago. "When my company finally became successful, reporters always asked who inspired me," she said. "I usually answered with business mentors because I never believed anyone would understand the real story." Ethan stepped beside her. "And the real story?" Charlotte smiled peacefully. "A young husband carrying heavy food boxes without expecting recognition. A wife handing handwritten encouragement to complete strangers. A little church parking lot where 2 ordinary people unknowingly rebuilt the future of someone they had never met." Ethan lowered his head for a moment as emotion quietly settled inside him. Emily would never have imagined any of this. "No," Charlotte answered. "That is what made her extraordinary." She turned toward him with calm sincerity. "Everything beautiful in my life began because your family chose compassion instead of convenience." Ethan looked once more at the shelves filled with old photographs, preserved letters, and simple reminders of a promise faithfully kept through the years. The room no longer felt unfamiliar. It felt like a place where gratitude had quietly been living all along. Charlotte took one slow breath before asking the question she had carried inside her heart for years. "May I finally meet the little girl whose father reminded me every day that goodness can survive even the deepest loss?" Ethan smiled gently for the first time that evening, and without hesitation he answered, "I think Lily would like that very much." 3 days later, the memory of that extraordinary evening still lingered quietly in Ethan's heart. Although life outside had returned to its familiar rhythm, something inside him had changed forever. Before sunrise, he stood in the kitchen of his modest suburban home flipping blueberry pancakes, while soft morning light slipped through the curtains. Lily hurried downstairs wearing a bright yellow sweater, her backpack decorated with tiny sunflower patches bouncing gently against her shoulders. "Daddy, you are smiling," she said with innocent surprise. Ethan laughed softly. "Am I?" Lily nodded. "You have not smiled like that in a long time." He looked toward the framed photograph of Emily resting on the kitchen counter before answering. "Sometimes people remind us that kindness never really leaves us." Later that afternoon, after picking Lily up from school, Ethan drove toward the neighborhood public library where they spent nearly every Thursday together. As they stepped onto the sidewalk lined with colorful autumn leaves, another vehicle quietly pulled into the parking space beside them. Charlotte stepped out wearing a simple navy sweater, blue jeans, and comfortable walking shoes instead of the elegant business suits everyone associated with her office. Without the polished corporate appearance, She looked remarkably approachable, almost as though she had quietly set aside the weight of running an entire company for one peaceful afternoon. Lily looked curiously toward her father before whispering, "She does not look like your boss." Ethan smiled warmly. "Today she is just Charlotte." Charlotte approached slowly, making certain the little girl never felt uncomfortable. She carried a canvas tote bag instead of a leather briefcase. From inside, she carefully removed a beautifully illustrated children's book whose cover displayed a field of bright yellow sunflowers beneath a blue sky. Kneeling until she reached Lily's eye level, she smiled gently. "Hello, Lily. Your father tells me you love stories." Lily accepted the book politely and immediately smiled when she noticed the flowers. "My mommy loved sunflowers." Charlotte's expression softened. "Mine too," she answered quietly. "Perhaps we can read this together someday." Lily nodded without hesitation. Inside the library, volunteers welcomed children into the weekly reading circle, while warm light filled every corner of the old brick building. Charlotte listened attentively as Lily excitedly explained her favorite books, her science project, and the small vegetable garden she cared for with her father behind their home. Ethan noticed something that touched him deeply. Charlotte never tried to impress Lily. She simply listened with genuine interest, asking thoughtful questions exactly the way Emily once had. After the reading hour ended, the three of them walked slowly through a nearby park where golden leaves drifted gently across the walking path. Lily skipped ahead before suddenly stopping and turning around. "Can I ask you something?" Charlotte smiled. "Of course." Lily hesitated only. "For a second, Daddy has been happier since he talked to you. Did you fix something?" Charlotte looked toward Ethan before answering with complete honesty. "No, I think your father simply remembered that love leaves behind more than memories. It also leaves behind people who choose to keep kindness alive." Lily seemed to think about those words for a long moment before quietly reaching for Charlotte's hand while holding Ethan's with the other. As they continued walking beneath the autumn trees, none of them realized that the gentle journey beginning with one ordinary afternoon would soon become the healing each of their hearts had been patiently waiting to find. Over the following weeks, Thursday afternoons quietly became the favorite part of all three of their lives. Sometimes they met at the neighborhood library before walking to a nearby cafe where Lily always ordered tomato soup and grilled cheese, while Ethan chose black coffee and Charlotte smiled every time the little girl insisted everyone taste her fries. Other evenings they wandered through the Chicago Botanical Garden, stopping whenever Lily discovered another flower she believed her mother would have loved. Charlotte never tried to take the place that belonged to Emily. Instead, she listened. She asked Lily about her favorite bedtime stories, the songs Emily used to sing, and the traditions that made ordinary days feel special. Every answer mattered to her because every memory helped her understand the remarkable woman whose kindness had quietly changed so many lives. Ethan noticed something that touched him deeply. Charlotte never interrupted. She never hurried conversations. She made every person feel as though they were the most important voice in the world simply by listening with complete attention. One bright Saturday morning, Charlotte accepted Ethan's invitation to visit their modest home for the first time. The small white house stood at the end of a peaceful suburban street lined with maple trees glowing with autumn colors. The wooden porch creaked gently beneath every step. The old silver sedan rested faithfully in the driveway, and colorful flower pots surrounded the entrance despite the cooler weather. It was not an expensive home, but it carried something far more valuable. It felt loved. Lily rushed into the backyard carrying packets of sunflower seeds while Ethan followed with a watering can and a small gardening shovel. "Mommy always planted new flowers every fall," Lily explained with a cheerful smile. "Daddy and I kept doing it because it makes the yard feel like she is still cheering for us." Without hesitation, Charlotte knelt beside them and gently pressed tiny seeds into the rich soil. Warm afternoon sunlight filtered through the maple branches while a cool breeze carried the scent of fresh grass across the yard. No one looked at a watch. No one answered business calls. Time slowed naturally because everyone present understood that the most meaningful moments rarely followed a schedule. After finishing the planting, Lily disappeared into the house before returning with a small wooden memory box carefully painted with bright yellow sunflowers. She placed it between them on the porch steps with quiet pride. "Daddy and I open this whenever we miss Mommy," she said softly. Ethan looked uncertain for a moment. but Lily smiled reassuringly. Mommy always liked sharing happy memories. Charlotte slowly lifted the lid. Inside rested old family photographs, handwritten recipes, birthday cards, pressed flowers, and dozens of little notes Emily had written over the years. One small card immediately caught Charlotte's attention. In Emily's familiar handwriting it read, "Always leave room at your table because someone, somewhere, is hoping to find a family." Charlotte gently traced the words with one fingertip before quietly wiping away a tear. She truly believed this, she whispered. Ethan nodded peacefully. She never separated kindness from everyday life. To her, they were exactly the same. Lily looked from one adult to the other before asking the question that had quietly grown inside her heart for weeks. "Can I tell you something?" Charlotte smiled warmly. "Of course." Lily took one deep breath before speaking. "When we are together, it does not feel like anybody is replacing Mommy. It feels like her kindness found another person who wanted to keep it alive." Neither Ethan nor Charlotte answered immediately. They simply sat together beneath the gentle autumn sunlight, listening to the breeze move through the maple leaves while the newly planted sunflower seeds rested quietly beneath the earth, unseen for now, yet already beginning the slow journey toward the light. Just as three hearts had quietly begun growing into a family that honored the past without being afraid of the future. Winter arrived quietly, covering the neighborhood with a gentle blanket of snow that made even ordinary mornings feel peaceful. Life settled into a comfortable rhythm that none of them had expected, but all of them quietly treasured. Every Saturday, Ethan woke before sunrise to prepare blueberry pancakes, while Lily carefully placed 3 plates on the kitchen table instead of 2, without anyone needing to ask why. Charlotte often arrived carrying fresh fruit, warm cinnamon bread from the neighborhood bakery, or another library book she thought Lily might enjoy. She never arrived with expensive gifts because she had learned something Emily understood long before either of them. The greatest treasures inside a family were never purchased. They were created one ordinary day at a time. After breakfast, they often worked together in the backyard, checking the flower beds where the sunflower seeds rested beneath the frozen ground, patiently waiting for spring. Ethan repaired an old wooden birdhouse, while Lily painted tiny yellow flowers across the roof. Charlotte quietly helped sand the rough edges before brushing away the sawdust with a smile that carried more peace than success had ever given her. The old silver sedan still rattled every morning before finally starting. The mailbox still leaned slightly after every heavy rain. The porch still creaked beneath every step. Yet somehow the little white house no longer felt lonely. Laughter had slowly replaced silence without anyone trying to force it. One snowy afternoon, Lily invited Charlotte into the living room where a collection of family photo albums rested on the coffee table. Together they looked through birthday celebrations, camping trips beside quiet lakes, school, concerts, and simple backyard picnics where Emily always smiled as though ordinary moments were life's greatest adventures. Charlotte never looked away when Emily appeared in the photographs. Instead, she smiled warmly, listening as Lily proudly explained every memory. Ethan noticed that Charlotte never competed with the past. She honored it. That quiet respect slowly removed the final fear Ethan had been carrying inside his heart. A few days before Christmas, Lily asked if everyone could decorate the evergreen tree Emily had planted beside the front porch years earlier. As evening settled across the peaceful neighborhood, warm white lights wrapped around the branches while gentle holiday music drifted through the open front door. Snowflakes floated softly through the golden glow surrounding the little house. Charlotte carefully unpacked a simple glass ornament shaped like a sunflower and held it thoughtfully before hanging it near the center of the tree. "Your mother would have chosen the brightest place," she said softly. Lily smiled before disappearing inside the house. Moments later, she returned carrying a small handmade ornament she had painted herself. It showed 3 sunflowers growing from the same garden. She carefully placed it into Charlotte's hands. "This one belongs to you," Lily whispered. Charlotte looked surprised. "Are you certain?" Lily nodded without hesitation. "Mommy always said family is not only the people you begin life with. Sometimes family is the people who keep showing up when life becomes difficult." Charlotte's eyes filled gently with grateful tears as she carefully placed the ornament beside the brightest light on the tree. Ethan quietly watched both of them before looking toward the evening sky. For the first time since Emily's passing, he no longer felt guilty for smiling about tomorrow. He finally understood that loving the future did not mean leaving the past behind. Sometimes the greatest way to honor someone was to allow the kindness they planted years earlier to continue growing inside the hearts of the people still willing to nurture it. And beneath the peaceful glow of the Christmas lights, three lives stood together in quiet gratitude, discovering that healing never asks anyone to forget, only to keep choosing love one ordinary day at a time. Spring arrived with quiet determination, and one warm Saturday morning the first sunflower pushed through the soil in the backyard just as Emily had always promised it would. Lily was the first to notice. She ran across the grass with joyful excitement before calling for Ethan and Charlotte, her voice carrying through the open windows of the little white house. Together they knelt beside the tiny green stem breaking through the earth, and for several peaceful moments nobody spoke. The simple flower seemed to say everything words could not. Life always found its way back toward the light. Weeks later, Bennett Financial celebrated another successful year, but this time the atmosphere inside the company felt different. Employees greeted one another with genuine warmth. Parents left early to attend school concerts without fear of judgment, and volunteer groups prepared meals for local shelters through programs Charlotte had quietly expanded. Ethan watched young employees laughing together in the lobby and finally understood how deeply Emily's kindness had continued growing long after she was gone. Charlotte had never built a company around profits alone. She had built it around people. During the annual appreciation gathering, Charlotte stood before her employees with nothing more than a small handwritten note in her hand. She smiled gently before speaking. People often ask what inspired this company. They expect a business strategy. The real answer is much simpler. She paused as every conversation faded into respectful silence. Many years ago, two ordinary people welcomed a stranger without asking for anything in return. They reminded me that success means very little unless it leaves room for compassion. She looked toward Ethan, standing quietly near the back of the room beside Lily. Everything beautiful we have built began with one act of kindness that expected no reward. The room remained completely silent before warm applause slowly filled the hall. Ethan lowered his eyes, humbled by words he never believed belonged to him. After the celebration ended, the three of them returned home beneath the soft colors of a spring sunset. The little backyard looked brighter than ever as rows of blooming sunflowers gently swayed in the evening breeze. Lily carefully placed fresh water into a small glass vase beneath Emily's photograph before smiling toward both adults. "Mommy would like today," she said softly. Ethan nodded. "I think she already does." Charlotte quietly stood beside him, not trying to replace a memory, but choosing instead to honor it every single day. Ethan looked at the peaceful garden, then at the woman who had faithfully carried gratitude inside her heart for nearly a decade without expecting anything in return. He reached for her hand with calm certainty. "The first time I asked you a question, I was only trying to make everyone laugh," he said with a gentle smile. "This time I mean every word. Would you continue walking through ordinary life with Lily and me, one quiet day after another?" Charlotte did not answer immediately. Instead, she smiled with grateful eyes and gently placed her hand in his. That quiet gesture said everything words never could. Lily happily wrapped her arms around both of them as the evening breeze carried the scent of blooming sunflowers across the yard. Above them, the sky slowly turned shades of gold, reminding each of them that the greatest miracles rarely arrived with noise or spectacle. They arrived quietly, through dignity, compassion, second chances, and ordinary people who chose kindness even when nobody was watching. And in that peaceful backyard, surrounded by flowers planted with love years before, three hearts discovered that the truest family is not built by forgetting yesterday, but by carrying its goodness faithfully into tomorrow.